All right, it's 10:15 and I like to start on time. Welcome to session 4, Pell LEU and SULA adjustments for transfer students coming from closed schools. My name is Holly Langer-Evans. I'm one of your instructors, and also with me is Marie Fitzpatrick. And I have been with the department 25 years as of November 2nd, and that's a long time, my silver anniversary. I have silver hair. You don't know that because I dye it, but yes, 25 years. I started with the Department of Education as a program reviewer for 2 years, and then I moved into the Experimental Sites and Quality Assurance program for 21 and a half years, and then I moved over to the Federal Loan School Support Team for the last year and a half. So I'm a little bit of a newbie over to this team, but it's a great team and I'm glad to be here. But prior to that, I was in the financial aid office. I was on that side. And so I'm very sensitive to what it is that you're going through. I was a financial aid director at a school in New Hampshire at Daniel Webster College, which was a flight school, and then at Boston University as a senior assistant director for many years. So I've been in financial aid for a very, very long time, and I love it. And I am very, very sensitive to students' needs, and I am very sensitive to your needs. So let's talk about what it is that we're going to be talking about today. And that's talking about closed schools and some of the issues that come up with that regarding subsidized loan limits, when a loan is incorrectly reported, when a loan is correctly reported, that's when life is good, and when a loan is going through closed school discharge. And then we're going to talk about Pell eligibility restoration impacts, which Marie is going to talk about, previous award year, current award year, tools to determine Pell lifetime eligibility used, the LEU, closed school restoration, and tips for assisting transfer students from closed schools. So let's move on to slide number 3. So we're going to talk about when a loan is incorrectly reported. How many of you have students coming to your school who transfer in from a closed school? Show me hands. Ah, that's why you're here today. One of the reasons anyway. And how many times do they have problems with their loans? Raise your hands, nice and tall. Okay, they're coming in because either that loan period hasn't been changed, hasn't been shortened. Is that an issue that you have? Yeah. Or that loan hasn't been, amount hasn't been changed, or that award hasn't been changed. So that subsidized usage period is way too high. So you're having some problems there. And we're going to talk about that. And we're going to talk about if a loan is going through discharge. How many of you have students who a loan is going through discharge and you're waiting? Okay, and you want to know what to do about that. And we're going to talk about that today too. So let's go on to slide number 4. So we know that a borrower is subject to the 150% rule when we have pending disbursements. So when you have a pending disbursement, you should always make those pending disbursements, right? You need to put them down to 0. So you want to do that because you want to have a nice, clean house. All right? So you want to just make sure those pending disbursements are taken care of. So a SUP is always calculated, however, when there is a loan dispersed. All righty? So you want to make sure that you're aware of that. You must reduce that loan amount to the sum of the actual disbursement, and you want to go in and you want to make sure you change that award. And you want to make sure you're changing that loan period, because if you don't, that student is going to have some issues there. And that when that happens, you're going to want to contact us if there's an issue, and we're going to talk about that in a few minutes, because that student isn't going to be able to get their subsidized loan. At some point, right now they might be okay, but sooner or later at their school, you're going to have an issue. So let's go on to the next slide, which is slide number 5. I am a very visual person, so when I was trying to learn about subsidized usage and the 150% rule, I needed to visualize this. And I think this is really a great way to do it. Why do I need to change that loan period? And it's all about math. So when you're trying to show a student or you're trying to show a new person at your office, this is a great slide to take out. When you look at your award start date and the end date, you count your days. So if you have your award start date as September 10th, 2015, and you have your end date as May 10th, 2016, and you count your days, and if you put this in an Excel spreadsheet, I promise you, because I did it, you have 244 days. So if you had 244 over 244, you're going to have 1. So your subsidized usage period is 1. But if your student is only going for a half a year, so if they're only going from September to December, and you count your days, it's 92 over 244, so it's 0.4. So the subsidized usage period is only 0.4. So if you don't shorten that loan period, that student is going to have a problem. So do you see in the math where the issue is? It's very, very visual. It's very helpful to see why you need to shorten that loan period. You don't shorten the academic year because it would mess up the math. There's only one time you change the academic year. And can you think about when that would be? If your academic year period is part of summer, if that's how you define it, and the student doesn't go during the summer, that's the only time you would change that academic year. Okay? Everybody okay with that? All righty, that's really important. So let's move on to the next slide, slide number 6. The annual loan limit exception. Now, I've got to get this right, so I'm going to take my note. This always stumps me, so I need my note for this one, so bear with me. The annual loan limit exception calls for COD to charge a full year of subsidized usage if the loan amount is at the full annual loan limit for the grade level, regardless of the loan period academic year ratio. Oh, I got here, sorry. So if less is dispersed, make sure you update the loan amount so this exception doesn't trigger. And you always want to go to electronic announcement number 8. January 1st, 2014, and the subsidized usage period question number 15. How many of you go to the 150% website out on IFAP? Oh, I don't see many hands. You want to go out to ifap.ed.gov, and there's a link for 150%. And there's a great Q&A out there, question and answers. It also links you to electronic announcements and federal registers for you all about 150%. It is a phenomenal tool for you. Also today, and throughout the conference, there's a SULA table for you, where Chuck Herman and myself are sitting, and we can answer questions for you on SULA. And I hope you come by and visit us should you have specific questions that you want to talk to us. All right? So please do that if you have specific questions. Let's move on to the next slide. How many of you have used a SULA calculator? Okay, a couple of you, not a lot of you though. There's a SULA calculator out there for you in COD, and you can't break it. You can go in, you can use it, you can set it up to take a look at a student, specific student. It's out there, and you can see whether or not you can get a loan through, and it won't mess up the student's record. And we can show you how to do that if you want to come visit us at the desk, and we can show you how to access that, all right? And the instructions are there for you. Also, we also have the to create a subsidized usage inquiry. How many of you used the usage inquiry function to contact us? Oh, have you gotten any emails from me directly? Or from Chuck? Or any of the FLIS team? We will get back to you on specific issues that you have. If you can't resolve a particular SULA query or you have questions, we're there to help you. And I'm going to show you how to access that as well. So let's move on to the next slide. And this is slide number 8. And this is instructions on how you can access the SULA calculator. And again, please come visit us at our table at the Resource Center. If you'd like to see it in person, we're happy to show that to you. That's why we're here. And on slide number 9, this is how you create a subsidized usage inquiry. If you have a student that you're having trouble, particularly at a closed school, if you have a student and you can't contact, if it's a recently closed school, you might be able to go on to COD and find the financial aid administrator. They might still be there. But if it's a closed school and it's been closed for a while, you're not going to probably be able to contact someone. So you would need to do this inquiry. And it would come to me because I deal with closed schools. I would have to contact the school participation team and get permission to open up that record and fix the problem. Either fix the loan period or fix the award, okay, and make the reduction that's necessary. Sometimes I can't do that because the school might be having some issues, and the school participation team is working with them, and I might have to wait a little bit, but I can let you know that and let you know how long it might take for that loan to be fixed. But usually I get to it right away, and it doesn't take too long. And I'm really good about being right on that and getting it fixed for you. And I stay right in contact with you. We're really good about that, all right? So, and it would be me that would be doing that for you. So we work with you to try to get these students taken care of because we want the students to get their loans as soon as possible. So let's move on to slide number 10. So when a loan is correctly reported, life is good. And I like to put this in here because sometimes schools get it right that are closed, and they're really working hard to get it right before the school closes, and it's nice. So let's move on to slide number 11. Now, a loan is going through a closed school discharge. Now, when schools are going through a discharge, what does it mean? Well, it means that the school is discharged. That means the student doesn't have to pay back. If it's approved, the student doesn't have to pay it. The student gets their money back if they paid. The student, if they had a bad credit, that is removed. And the student, I think I got all of that. I'm getting ahead of myself. Yep. And we need to remember that the borrower does not get it automatically. They have to apply for it. And you have to remember that it's not done automatically and that they have to apply for it. And the process takes several weeks. And the student has to do everything they need to do on their end. It doesn't always get stopped at our end, okay? If it is, it's usually for a good reason. Now, the school, 100% discharge for a direct loan, the school, it gets approved if the school closes while they're still enrolled, and they do not have to complete the program because of the closure itself. And if they were approved because of a leave of absence, and the school closes within the 120 days. Now, the loan discharge, if the credits are earned from, there's a problem if their credits are earned from those loans are accepted by a new school, the loans are not eligible for the discharge. So if there's, if there's a teach out and those credits are approved, then they're not going to get that discharge. And if the borrower graduated, they're not going to get the discharge. So it's not an automatic. Now, if the borrower left the school more than 120 days before the school closure, they also cannot get the discharge. And just don't assume that it's an automatic because these other issues can occur. So what do you do if you're waiting for that discharge to come through? What are your options? Well, what you can do, if you have a subsidized loan from a now closed school and you use 1 year of eligibility, the student applies for a discharge but doesn't have sufficient remaining eligibility for that subsidized loan at your school. You can originate both a subsidized loan and an unsubsidized loan, let's say for $3,500. You can hold back that subsidized loan, and then you can disperse on the unsub. Have any of you done that before? No? But you can do that. And you can disperse on that unsub loan, and then if and when that former subsidized loan is canceled, you would zero out that unsub disbursement and enter the subsidized disbursement for the same amount on the same date, basically replacing one with the other. You can do that if you want. And if the former sub loan doesn't get canceled, you have dispersed the unsub and you can leave it be. So you can do that if you like. Or you can originate the subsidized loan and wait to disperse until the discharge goes through. But if that student drops to less than half time, or the loan period ends and the loan still has not been originated, you will not be able to originate the loan. So you have a couple of options there. So this is just a little review sheet to go over what we discussed and what options that you have. And these are your SULA resources. And these are your Dear Colleague letters that we have that are directly related to SULA that I think that you would find particularly helpful. Electronic announcement number 8 that we discussed. And also, the other one that we use most often in questions, electronic announcement number 20, is configuring a loan when the rep is less than one year. Now, loan discharge resources is really great. You want to go to studentaid.gov. You select forgiveness, cancellation, and discharge, and the cancellation and discharge process, application, and quick links. How many of you have gone to this resource? Or had your students go to this resource? Okay, a couple of you. This is a great resource for loan discharge. And you should have your students go there or yourself to go there for any questions. And Maria, I'll leave it to you.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. I hope everybody doesn't mind, but I'm going to sit this morning. I've got 5 sessions to do today, and I'm going to try and conserve some energy, so I hope you don't mind. Can you hear me okay? Okay. I'm not getting the same kind of feedback I usually do when I'm on a mic, so. Well, welcome. Thanks, Holly. I didn't think she'd go through that quite so quickly. I have a few more slides, I think, than Holly, so you might be with me a little bit longer. We're going to talk about the Pell Grant eligibility restoration that's happening now for students that attended closed schools. This is not something that we had done in the past. We got a reinterpretation of some legislation and some guidance that was previously out there. And through your comments from the community, we've also heard, there was a lot of talk about the fact that loans got discharged. Why not the grant eligibility once we went to a lifetime eligibility used? And for 5 years, we've been working on trying to get this changed, and it's finally happened. So last spring is when we started to restore the eligibility for those students that were eligible. So part of the presentation, I'm going to talk about how schools are eligible for these closed school restorations, what we consider a closed school, and then how students are eligible for these. And then we'll go through some examples so that you can understand how we're calculating this and how it might affect the transfer students that come to your school. Okay? Going to start with the resources. If you need the background of how we approach this, first there is the electronic announcement from last December that talked about the reinterpretation of the previous policy guidance. So that was out there since last year. And then in April, we followed with an EA introducing how we were going to start this process and the timeline we were using. We used a phased approach. Much of what we did initially in the spring and throughout the summer was very manual. And in October, we started with phase 2 when we were able to automate more of this in the COD system so that it was running a little bit more automatically. But either way, to our customers, you out there, you should be seeing the same thing. The change from phase 1 to phase 2 was really a benefit for me, so I wasn't doing this manually in the system. So we're going to look at a little bit more about how we did that. But if you want more specifics on a technical basis of how we did some things in the background, and you're more of a techie person at your institution, I suggest you might want to go to the COD update. We are doing that twice this afternoon, Wood Mason and I, and it'll cover both grants and loans. And then we're doing again tomorrow. So, all right. So the first thing we want to talk about is how are closed schools determined to be eligible for the Pell LEU closed school restoration process. And this is actually the difficult part of it. Once we do that, actually restoring the student's eligibility is a piece of cake compared with trying to find these schools that have closed and figuring out when their data is in such a state that we could actually try and restore. As you can imagine, schools close for different reasons. Sometimes it's a very planned process, and sometimes it's kind of like, kind of a surprise thing. So the school needs to have officially closed, and that's not just a location that has closed. It's actually the whole structure, the main campus and the locations would have had to close. So if they're just shutting down a satellite location, that does not qualify for Pell restoration. So that's one of the main things that we get questions about, asking why the student isn't eligible. I said, well, the school they went to isn't closed. So it really does have to be entirely closed to qualify. And the school has to be closed long enough that they could have kind of cleaned up their data. They need to have given their final enrollments to NSLDS so that we can figure out if the student actually attended and what status they were at. The department has to do some kind of final audits and be in some part of the process with the final audits for that closed school for us to determine whether everything's okay for us to start restoring the Pell eligibility for those students. So I guess the thing that I'm trying to say is if a student comes into you and said, hey, I went to this closed school, and you're looking to see if the department has already restored the Pell, it's going to be several months at minimum before we can start doing that from the time that the school closed to when you'll start seeing the restorations. And we'll talk a little bit about timelines in a minute. And the other thing is we are only considering schools that have closed after 1994, so 1995 and forward. That's 23 years. We think that that is sufficient. It's also the time frame in which NSLDS started to store enrollment data. So, and that's a key piece of what we need to determine whether a student is eligible for Pell restoration. So 1994 was kind of the buzz year that we picked to move forward from. And we have restored almost everyone that was eligible between 1995 through 2016 already. We are currently examining the schools that have closed in 2017. We've already started our analysis on that, and we're trying to figure out those that closed in the early part of this year and which ones are in a state that they may be eligible to start restoring their students. Okay. The next is how a student's eligibility for the closed school restoration is determined. We have to actually define the students that received Pell at the closed school that may be eligible. So not everyone that received a Pell grant from a closed school is going to be eligible for this restoration process. First and foremost, they had to have received Pell from the closed school, and they have to have not completed their program. If they graduated from the program that closed school offered, they would not be eligible for the Pell eligibility restoration. And that's one of the reasons why we need the link with the enrollment data in NSLDS, because that's what tells us that. It tells us whether they withdrew, when they withdrew, or if they graduated from that program, and that's what we're looking for. They also had to have attended the closed school within 2 years of that school closing. We figure that those are students that possibly would have been really affected by the fact that that school closed. So if the school closed in 2016, but the last time this student that we're looking at attended that institution was in 2012, we're not going to consider them for Pell eligibility restoration, and I hope that makes sense. We're looking for the students that are most affected by this the closing of this institution. And if they chose to part ways with that institution 4 years before it closed, we figure that that is not. So we picked a 2-year period in our definition. Okay. Let's talk about some tools, and each one of these we're going to talk about in detail. So this just lists out, it's kind of a mini agenda. We're going to, the tools for you to determine if a transfer student received a Pell LEU closed school restoration. So you are the open school, you have a transfer to your institution, and you're going to try and figure out whether, oh, did they go to a closed school, and are they part of this new Pell LEU restoration process? So these are the 4 things. A student may bring a targeted email that they received from the department to you and say, hey, what does this mean? I received this. And if you look at the resources page, we did give you an attachment in those EAs that tells you exactly what we sent to the students, so you know what we told them. So it shouldn't be a surprise what this targeted email says if they bring one to you. You might also receive an edit 221 from the COD in a response file. You at the school may receive a targeted email from the department alerting you to a student that you have an association with. We'll talk about that. And some of the COD web screens as well will tell you this. Okay, so let's look at the student. The students that received those targeted emails from the department because we restored their Pell eligibility, we are not sending every single student that we restored Pell eligibility a targeted email. We selectively chose those students that we thought were the most affected by the restoration process, and that would be the students that had greater than 500% before, greater than 500% lifetime eligibility used before the restoration process, and now that has been lowered. So especially in this current award year, they weren't eligible for a full scheduled federal Pell Grant, and now they may be. We are also looking at those students that were over the 600% lifetime eligibility use, and the ones that are now less than. So they were previously not eligible possibly at your institution, but now they may be. And also, we have scanned everyone we've restored eligibility for to see if they have any data on COD loans, primarily at a grade level 6 or 7, meaning they are now in graduate school. So it doesn't matter that their Pell eligibility was restored, even though we still restored it. We just didn't tell them about it because they're now a graduate student. It means nothing to them. So we did try and filter out those people that were the most affected and only targeted email sending to them. And the other thing I didn't put on the slide, but we actually had to have an email address for them, but that kind of goes without saying. So please note that we restored everybody that was eligible for restoration, but these are the categories that received the targeted emails, okay? Next, let's talk about Edit 221. Now, this is, you're not going to receive an Edit 221 unless you've processed aid for this student, this transfer student already. So this is not like probably the best tool to find the students that are coming into you as a new student, but it may help you identify any student that you have on file at your institution. And if you receive a 221 on a loan, on a teach grant, anything that you send to COD that they process, we will send you back an Edit 221 saying, hey, here's a little warning edit. It doesn't need to be resolved. There's nothing you have to do with it, but it is a way to scan your system and say, hey, do I have any 221s out there? These are the kids that had Pell eligibility restoration. Okay, so look for that. Yeah, that's all I wanted to say about that. I'll save it to the next slide. Okay, so the next tool. We are sending targeted emails to schools that have an association with the students that got Pell restored, Pell eligibility restored. So we send a targeted email, and in that targeted email, we direct you to a file share that you can pull down off of the COD web that contains the list of students and some basic information about how much we restored, what their LEU is right now, things like that. So you can see a quick and dirty list of students that were restored recently from your institution. So if you got one of these targeted emails, it will not tell you anything in the targeted email pretty much except go out there and get this list. Your school is considered to have an association with the student we restored if any of these conditions are out there. Your school dispersed any financial aid, not just Pell, to the student in the current award year or the one previous. So for those students that may have used up all their eligibility in the previous award, and that's why you couldn't give them Pell in this year, we're still telling you about those students because that might have changed with the restoration. Or your school's federal school code was listed in the highest CPS transaction for at least one of the last 3 award years. So that's to identify those students that you couldn't give any Pell to because maybe they weren't eligible. They declined any loans, so you didn't process any aid for that student, so you didn't get a 221. The student never came in and said, hey, I got this targeted email from the Department of Ed, what do I do with it? This is kind of those people that might fall through the cracks, that you may have wanted to, they may have wanted to enroll in your institution, but they couldn't because they weren't eligible for aid. Now they may be eligible for Pell. So we thought, if nothing else, you know that people that are interested in your institution have now had this done. Okay. And let's go on to the next slide and we'll look at the changes to the Pell LEU history screen. So this is kind of, I hate doing screenshots on slides because no one could ever see them. I'm currently just got new trifocals and I know I can't see that and it's right in front of me. So if everybody, hopefully everybody is familiar with the Pell LEU history screen where it gives you in COD, this is the official record of all of their Pell at the department since 1974. And those will all be listed here. And at the bottom, there is a section for Pell LEU adjustments. Now that's always been out there, but you won't ever see it come up unless there has been an adjustment for a student. So 99% of the students that you look up on Pell LEU history screen are not going to have this little piece at the bottom. But for those of us that are a little blind, made a little bit bigger, it will show, and the adjustment type now will actually read closed school restoration. It will tell you the closed school that we restored that Pell at, the award year that is associated with that restoration, the percentage of the LEU that was adjusted for that school, and the date we did the restoration. Now, the other new item we added that's highlighted and the little arrow pointing, we're going to talk about on the next screen. And that is the little pop-up. If the student had more than, if we've done an adjustment and say the closed school, or maybe we did an incorrect or premature restoration on that student, that the closed school, there was a pop outstanding and something happened and we had a change in that student's disbursement at that closed school after we restored. We now in phase 2 have the ability to automatically identify that and adjust the restoration that we did. The pop-up will tell you through the hyperlink on the previous page, you can see everything we've done for that restoration for that student. The most recent will be on top, and anything that came before that will be on the bottom of that. So it'll just give you everything you ever wanted to know and more. So that is out there as of October. Okay. Let's go on about some of the more obscure aspects of this. If you weren't lost in the weeds yet, we're done with the tools that are going to show you who's out there. We're going to talk about, you've determined that, yes, you have a transfer student that may be affected by a closed school Pell eligibility. And it's probably the most far-reaching change we've produced by the Pell Restoration Project that we've done this year. If a student receives an adjustment, it actually changes how COD calculates the total eligibility used threshold for that student for that award year, so that we can incorporate the closed school adjustments that we've done for that student. So we had to come up with this convoluted formula because financial aid isn't convoluted enough. We thought we'd add another layer, right? All for the good of the students and getting back their Pell eligibility. So in these altered TEU calculations, I have two there. The one on the top is the straightforward one. We know that a student is getting 100% of their scheduled federal Pell Grant, or possibly that's the maximum they usually could get. But now we have the added bonus of getting the absolute value of the net of the closed school adjustments we did for that student for that award year. And yes, I've done more than one closed school adjustment for a student in one award year, meaning they went to 2 closed schools in the same award year. Like, I don't know how that's possible, but it did happen. So this calculation will handle that. It'll add them together, it'll give it the net value of that, and we actually add that on to the regular 100% maximum that we're usually editing against. Now we have year-round Pell. So now on top of that, we had to get another formula to say, okay, is the additional eligibility indicator true in this case for this student for this award year? If it is, we're not using 100% as our base, we're using 150%, and then again, we still have to add in the absolute value of the net of the closed school adjustments for that award year. Okay, so at least you know how we did that. So a student had, let's say, 33% restored for that award year, and they had 100%. So now COD is now calculating the total eligibility used threshold before we put somebody in POP, before we start applying edits to you at the new school. That student can get up to 133% in that year. Or if the AEI is true, the student's going to get 188%, 83%, sorry, for that year. Okay, let's go on. We did our fancy little thing there. Now I'm going backwards. Sorry. Okay, are we on the example? Yes, example. Oh, good. We're in our famous examples here. Love these two. Okay, I have 2 examples for you. Transfer Judy. I'm going to give you all of the information here, and then we'll talk a little bit about Judy's case, and then we have another case for Alex. Transfer Judy. She attended I'm a Beauty College in 2015-16 and also in 16-17 award year. And I'm a Beauty College closed. And Transfer Judy, unfortunately, could not complete her program in the time before the school closed. So Transfer Judy received a Pell LEU closed school restoration totaling 130% across the 2 award years that she was in attendance at that school, 15-16 and 16-17, which reduces her Pell LEU from 580 down to 450. So coming to your institution in 17-18, Transfer Judy has a full eligibility of 100% of her scheduled federal Pell Grant at your school, not the 20% she would have had if there hadn't been any Pell eligibility restoration. Normally, this transfer student coming into you would have had a 580% LEU. You would have been like, sorry, 20%, that's all I can give you. Now with the eligibility restoration, she can have the whole 100% for 17-18, okay? So that's the difference it makes for Transfer Judy. Let's look at Transfer Alex. Okay, Transfer Alex attended I'm a closed school in 16-17 and the summer of 17-18, but did not complete his program before the school closed. Transfer Alex shows up at your institution. He received, okay, so I'll give you the stats on what he received. He received a Pell LEU closed restoration totaling 125% across 2 award years, and it changes his Pell LEU from 225 down to 100%. He received a negative 100% restoration for 16-17 and a 25% in the current year 17-18 for that summer. So Transfer Alex is also eligible in 17-18 for year-round Pell at your institution. So let's look at what happens of the impact of this. Okay. So not only do you know about the restoration for Transfer Alex, but you also have to calculate what Transfer Alex's new maximum is possibly at your institution. So it has to do with the little convoluted formulas that we went over on the previous slide. But it's not really that difficult to calculate Transfer Alex's eligibility at your school in 17-18. The TEU formula is 150% plus the absolute value, meaning doesn't matter if it's plus or minus, of the 25% we restored, and his new maximum TEU is 175%. So it seems kind of silly in this example because you have to know what this is, but we're still going to take out the 25% that's already been dispersed at the other school when you do this. So it comes out the fact that you can give them the whole 150% for year-round Pell at your institution. I just wanted to give an example of how a current year restoration would affect your calculation and what that student would be eligible for. If Alex had not been eligible for closed school restoration, the LEU would have remained at 225, and the 17-18 remaining eligibility at your institution would have been 125%. Okay? So just to give you some indication of how this is working. Tips for assisting transfers, and this is where we'll open this back up to Holly and we have a list of questions that we think it would be good for you to ask if you're encountering a transfer student, and when you're counseling them. Did they attend a closed school? So if they did, that would be your first indication that maybe you have to look at some of the issues that Holly and I discussed about their loans, discharges, Pell LEU restoration. Maybe you have somebody that you need to, maybe you have to revamp your procedures at your schools for your counselors. You know, did the student go to a closed school? Okay, great. Now we have new bullet points in our procedures as to what to look for, where to go, resources, things like that. Did they complete their program at their closed school? If they did, you know that they're not going to be eligible for Pell restoration for sure, at least. Did they receive a subsidized direct loan or a Pell grant at the closed school? If they didn't receive either of those closed school, it's not really going to be an issue for your counselors. Did they apply for a loan discharge, and if so, what is the status? And Holly gave you great tools to figure out whether that is the case. And if the student has not received a Pell LEU closed school restoration yet, might they within the current award year? And if so, would that change their Pell eligibility? So you can, even before we do the closed school eligibility, you can check, okay, yes, the student went to a closed school. You can go into NSLDS and check the enrollment at that closed school. Does it say G for graduated? You know that they completed their program. They're not going to be eligible for Pell School restoration. You can go ahead and package them as you normally would. If it says that they withdrew and it's within the last 2 years before that school closed, it's pretty likely that that student is going to get a Pell closed school adjustment. So in that case, you may be comfortable awarding them Pell at a different level. Maybe you wouldn't be comfortable dispersing that Pell, but maybe packaging with that Pell and then seeing how the restoration came along in the next few months if it's in the current award year. You have anything to add, Holly? Okay, so that is the end of what we have. However, there are mics, and we figure you might have some questions for us, and we have plenty of time. So we'll open the floor up for a lively game of Stump the Fed. You're up.
Good morning, I guess.
Good morning.
I'm James Huebner with the Dallas County Community College District, so you know where I am. We have a situation that stumped us a little bit. I think we understand the regulations, but we want to have confirmation. We have a student who came to us from a closed school, received discharged for closed school for the loans, wants to transfer to our institution using the credits from the closed school that we will accept because we have, even though normally we wouldn't accept the credits because they came from a school that's not regionally accredited, we made some exceptions in our transfer policy to do so. And the Pell LEU is fine. They didn't use much of their Pell at the closed school, so we're not concerned about restoration. They do not want to take loans out at our school, but they do want to utilize the Pell. We are concerned because they want to use the credits. Can we offer them Title IV aid, the Pell, or are we not allowed to offer the Pell grant to them? And we can't find any specific exclusion for Pell in this closed school restoration. We know that the loans itself would not be acceptable to do new loans, but we're concerned about the Pell grant.
Okay, and I can answer that. So you will not find anything that addresses the part about the credits being used or not, whether the student received a Pell restoration or not. The rules for loan discharge and the rules for Pell LEU restoration are entirely separate, and they do not cross over. So it was very specific for loan discharge. For this, it's not the same. So if the department restored the Pell, go with it. Don't ask any more questions. Don't look any further for regulations you're not going to find. And Merry Christmas. Okay? Next, Mike.
Hi, I'm Diane Cheng from the Institute for College Access and Success, and I have a question about the process by which the Pell restoration happened. So just to make sure I fully understand, so all of the schools that met the criteria, that were identified as closed and had all their information and as NSLDS and COD, that closed between 1995 and 2016, almost all of them, all of the students who attended those schools had all of the Pell grants received at those schools restored?
If they were eligible, yeah.
Right, yeah.
Yes, and we are still working on a small group from 1995 to 1999 that had locations, and I mean, there's still a handful of that I was working on Thanksgiving week. So we'll see if those. When I got to the conference, I don't know if what state those are in, but that was just a handful from 1995 to 1999. But generally, 99% of the students that were eligible between 1995 and 2016 are out there in COD, restored, period, the end.
Thank you for all your work on that. Do you have an estimate of how many students that was?
Yeah, we will in a minute.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Melinda Mitchell. I'm from SIPI in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I have a student who had loans forgiven from ITT Tech, and one English course is transferable. Where are we in that situation? If our school accepts that one English course out of 80 credits, is his loan not forgivable?
You can't.
1 credit to 100 credits, just no credits whatsoever.
You can't accept any of the credits for that to be discharged.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, thank you.
Yes.
Yes, my name is Tony Tanking with Benedictine College in Kansas. There's currently an institution that we have come in contact with in Oklahoma that will be closing here at the end of this term. So we're currently working with identifying students that may be coming up to our institution. As in regards to the Pell restoration, I guess my question is there anything that the student has to do to initiate that process, or is that something that is handled by the department, that once the school closes, that those students are automatically reviewed, or is there something that we need to inform the students that they need to do?
No, the student really doesn't play a part in this. It's really, if you're in contact with the school that is in the process of closing, are you in contact with them?
I have had communications with them,
Okay,
yes.
so the most important thing that those closed school, and it looks like, it sounds like it's a planned closing, which is always cleaner for the department.
It was announced about 3 weeks ago.
And
yes.
it's, yeah, and in that case, the thing that we need most from that closed school is for them to submit all of their final enrollment data to NSLDS. That is the most important thing, and the thing that trips us up the most in trying to help these students is that the closed school never did their final reports to NSLDS to tell us that they withdrawn or whatever. We still have people out there that say they're half-time. Well, we know they're not half-time at this closed school. They either have to be withdrawn or graduated or somehow some other status. But that's what we have the most problem with. So if the closed school has submitted that data to NSLDS on those students, that would be the thing. And you're more likely to have a closed school restoration happen more quickly on a planned closing than on a surprise closing.
Sure. Now, and just real quick, in addition to that, does the issue of having a teach-out agreement have any impact on whether or not a Pell restoration may or may not occur? Even though the student may qualify based upon the criteria you've identified, does the teach-out agreement have any effect on that?
A detail agreement?
A
Oh,
teach-out.
teach-out. I'm sorry,
I'm sorry,
teach-out.
a teach-out.
A teach-out, yes, it may have, because if the teach-out is going to allow the student to complete their program.
And we're transferring it, and in those scenarios, we would be transferring in all of their credits. So that's where I'm wondering if there would be a justification for a Pell restoration.
No,
if
we're
there
still
really is none.
restoring people that got teach-outs. But you are not in any way taking over the closed school. Your institutions are not
No,
merging,
it's
absorbing.
a complete break. Those
No,
those
it's
students
just,
are coming,
it's
would be
just a
coming,
plain out
yes.
teach-out. No, the students may still be eligible for restoration.
Okay.
Okay.
And you said that process can usually take several months. So if we're dealing with this for the spring term, then we may be
It's
not
gonna-
seeing anything till after the end of the spring term.
It possibly.
Okay.
It depends. We're hoping to move through these more quickly now that we've gone into phase 2.
Okay. Hopefully you're aware of this school. So I've asked that financial aid office as well, you know, are you updating all of the end dates?
I am not
correctly?
aware of schools that close within the last 3 months, because I'm still focused on the ones that closed in the first part of the year.
Sure.
And I try not to focus too much on the ones that just closed yesterday or,
Sure.
2
No.
weeks ago, because they're not really going to be up for my process here for a
Right.
couple of
Yeah, the
months.
school just made the announcement 3 weeks ago
Yeah.
to all the students, and we're trying to help them
Our
transition
program
fast.
compliance team is working full force on those schools, and it won't come over to my area until they do what they need to do with that school to tell me gives me the blessing and tells me it's
Sure.
okay for restoration.
All right, thank you.
Monica?
Good morning. I'm Leslie
Not
Lloyd.
yet.
I'm with Craven Community College in North Carolina, and we're a very small institution, and so my staff is very limited. So the way that I've been identifying these is just looking at that file share through COD.
Okay.
And then just like pulling that once a month. And then I'm not asking my staff to review any of that, and I'm just reviewing them individually. That would be covering my basis as far as like identifying these particular students prior to the code 221, correct?
Yes, with a qualifier. The file share is not something we issue regularly, so you can't pull it down once a month. When we do the restoration, we send a file share. So in this year, we did like large batches of restorations, and we would send a file share, and then we'd do some more, and we'd send another file share. But you're not receiving them on a regular basis. Now, when we go into this new process where it's automated, you might, but you're a very close, you said you're a very small school, so you may not have a file share now for another 6 months.
Do we get notified when there's a new file share with that?
Yes, every time we have a new file share with for your institution, for a student that is associated with you, you will get the targeted email, say, go out and get a new one. There's a new one out there for you.
Okay, and to whom is that usually sent?
Whoever the contact is listed at your institution in COD. So you need to review the contacts in COD to make sure that there's one for Pell, there's one for DL, then there's one for the financial aid director, and there's one for the chief operating officer and those kind of things. Some are through the EAP, which is the director, the president, the chief financial aid officer.
And I guess that's why I'm asking, because I just became the director, and we're currently going through recertification, and so it's all tied up, and so it's the old director's email until I'm through that process.
Okay.
But I'm listed as all the Pell,
Okay.
and we don't do loans, but.
And Chris, I think it's going to the, I thought it was going to the Pell contact.
The Pell contact.
It's
Okay,
going to
then
the
we're
Pell
good.
contact
Okay,
at your
perfect.
school.
Okay, wonderful, thank you.
Right, because we know that the directors, at some of the larger schools, we don't want the directors looking at these. I was at one of those schools, I'm like, God, I hope my director never looks at any of this and tries to fix any of these, because that'll just cause me more work. Okay, next one, and we
Hi.
are still working on the numbers, I didn't forget you, okay? I got somebody in the first row, we're looking on that.
Hi, good morning. My question is, I understand that we'll get the file share through COD, but what I'm also wondering, when the Pell restoration is recalculated, so to speak, will the school receive a subsequent transaction from the ISER to show that the Pell LEU calculation has changed? Because usually on the ISA, we'll see the Pell LEU calculation or the percentage. So I'm wondering, once that Pell LEU restoration has been done, will the school receive a subsequent ISAR transaction?
Okay, I have a very definitive sometimes for you, okay? So, when the LEU changes, and this is across the board, whether this is for Pell restoration or some other issue that changes the LEU for that student, up or down, we send it on to NSLDS. NSLDS is then linking to CPS that does the ISER. And it goes through the regular pre- and post-screening rules to determine whether a new ISER should be generated. And for the students that were most affected on that list that we went over on that slide, the answer is probably going to be yes. So if the student was over 600 and went below 600, yes, new ISER is produced. If the student went from 500 to under like 400, yes, it would be produced. If the student went from 200% to 175, nope. It's not really affecting them. They're not in the danger zone, and they're still going to get Pell eligibility one way or the other. It's the ones that are over 600 going under 500 and so forth. So same post and pre and post screening rules for that.
No, I'm good. All right, great. Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm Megan Ruth. I'm from American Public University. I've got a couple questions about, the first question I have is about SULA. What we've run into in the past, I've got, one or two ladies in my office that are our SULA experts. Everybody goes to them. They calculate it out. They know it frontwards and backwards, which I really appreciate that. We do run into problems when we reach out to schools, not closed schools, but schools that are currently active where it's not correct in COD, the academic year is not correct. Like we can clearly see the loan period, there's disbursements out there that haven't been canceled, loan periods haven't been adjusted, or disbursements were canceled, loan periods wasn't adjusted, things like that. We reach out to the school for an update, and the schools kind of refuse to take action. And I was wondering if we could use that SULA inquiry in COD to see if someone else could take, because I mean, it's been escalated to me. I've reached out to their director, and it's just kind of like, this is the way we've always processed it, and we don't know what you're talking about,
Absolutely.
kind of thing.
That's exactly what you should do.
So
And
we should
we'll-
submit that on COD, the SULA inquiry?
Absolutely.
Okay,
I've done that many a times.
that is great. I appreciate
And
that, because
trust
we
me,
just
they
reached
fix
like a
it.
stalemate. We're just like spinning our wheels, and they're not just
Sometimes,
taking any action.
oftentimes people don't update the COD, their EAP, and put in the right contacts, and oftentimes that's the issue. So just a reminder, make sure that if staff changes, that you update your EAP and put for everyone, the right contacts out there, and that really does help. That's oftentimes an issue. So yeah, please do that, and we'll take care of that for you.
All right, great. And then I had a question about the Pell restoration reports that are available on COD for download. We've gotten several large ones, like several hundred students on them.
Yes.
And some of the information is pretty
I
old.
was
Beauty
busy this
schools,
summer.
things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's really surprising. We get in, and it's kind of a lot. So when we get into review, those reports, when they're available for download, have they already taken into account the G status and NSLDS, the enrollment status, or the grade level 7 or 8, 6 or 7? Or is that something that's on the school that this is a potential closed school, now you need to research all of this?
No, these are students that we have deemed eligible for restoration and we have restored. You may have some graduate students in there. Depending on what time of year it is, we still wanted to tell you, because if they've applied for the upcoming year and you have started the loan process for that graduate student, but they were still an undergraduate with an institution, we didn't want to cut out the fact that they may still be eligible for the current award year. So we didn't cut out the people with graduate information on file in COD for the schools. But we have the students that had a G on NSLDS, they were not restored. So they'll never be on your file share that you get. They're not eligible for restoration.
Okay, great. And then for some of these that are no longer enrolled, well, like we get them. They haven't been with us for a little while. If it's within 180 days, should we still, even though they're no longer enrolled at the university, still evaluate them for the late disbursement, the potential, upwards awarding of additional Pell, see if they qualify for a late disbursement? And
Yeah,
then,
late disbursement rules still apply.
that's what we thought. But
Yeah, sorry.
I was kind of hoping you'd say, yeah.
I was trying to work through them as fast as humanly possible, really.
I think that was it. Yes, thank you very much.
Yeah, I got it. Okay, I have your number of how many people we've restored Pell for. It is 295,856. And most of those were manually.
How many children beats were in that?
Hi, my name is Chris Kelly with DeVry University. My question is regarding Pell restoration. And I'm just wondering, have you had any situations where you have restored a Pell record and then maybe some additional information has been found where you realize you should not have restored that record?
Yes.
And if so, do you undo the restoration or do you leave it there since you initially did it for the student?
We have undone the restoration, and it has happened very rarely. The first time, I think it was like 34 students, so out of the 300,000 almost that we've done. And it was pretty quickly after we had restored it. We found a problem and we pulled it back. I think it was even before we sent the file share, so the school may not have known about it. But it's very rare, we're hoping, but that is one of the reasons why we built the pop-up, that you could see the history of what had been done to that student in case something did have to be adjusted. And we're going to run the risk. We're not running as big a risk because we restored all of the old years. You know, going back 23 years, I'm pretty sure if I restored that Pell from 1990, you know, that it's really should have been restored. It's when we get into the more current years and we're coming up to the schools that close in 2017, I am a little bit more concerned that we might run into that slightly more, even though I am doing my due diligence to make sure that everybody that we restore, we should really be restoring right now. But we will have to cross those paths when we come to it if it creates a problem for you or the student.
Okay. Yeah, my follow-up to that is then just if you do come across that situation where you realize something would have to be undone, is there any kind of process that we would be notified about those students who you are undoing it for?
That would have to be decided when it happens. And I'm sure that there would be a very eloquent EA that I would have to draft about that.
All
And
right.
I'm hoping I'll never have to draft it.
All right, thanks.
Sure. Hi.
Hi, my name's Amajit Pablo. I work for a third-party servicer in Greenville, South Carolina. Just had a quick question about one of your slides about your transfer student, Judy, the options that they had. Was there any reason why she was not eligible for the 150%? On the slides when you were talking about you had to decide whether they were not eligible for the 150% Pell for 17-18?
That's another session. That's the year-round Pell section that is in this room right after lunch. But deciding whether someone is eligible for the additional eligibility, that is the year-round Pell session.
Okay.
So it's not that's not really about restoration, but it is about whether a student is eligible for year-round Pell. So if you're unfamiliar with year-round Pell and how that works, I suggest you look up session 19.
No, I'm familiar with the criteria for it. I was just wondering why you had determined that student wasn't, but you were just showing an example where they weren't, right?
I was just trying to give you the example of where the threshold lies for that student. If they're not eligible for year-round Pell, then the threshold is 100% of their eligibility, plus or minus the net of the restorations. Otherwise, if you're working with a student that is eligible for year-round Pell, then the threshold is 150 plus or minus those restorations.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Have we run out of questions? Okay, come on.
Your other Pell LEU example, Alex,
Alex,
I had a question about that one because he was eligible for the 150% for 17-18, and with his restored, it was the 25% taking him to 175. But then you said that we would still only award him 150.
Just like you would any other transfer student, if you were trying to determine their eligibility at your institution, you still have to take those disbursements into consideration. And the restoration in that current award year just acts as an offset.
Okay, so he'd still only get the maximum of 150, but
Right.
it just takes down what we're looking at
Yeah,
in COD.
he still doesn't
takes
get
it
more
down
than 150, just like
175.
any other kid.
Okay, cool. All right, great, thanks.
Yeah, sure. Anybody else? Going once? Going twice? Okay, have a great conference. Hope to see you in a few other sessions I'm in.